Thompson-Boling Arena, they're going to be called what, Caleb Calhoun? The Thompson-Boling Arena. How do they
I believe
verbalize
it's
it?
food. I believe it's Food City at Thompson-Boling Arena, or something like that. Yeah, it's or Thompson-Boling Arena by Food City. It's one of the two. I don't know exactly how they're going to phrase the name yet.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Is this cool? In our 3:45 a.m. production meeting, we talked about the implications of NIL. But is this just, I mean, is it cool that they're doing this? Because there were lifetime agreements with the Thompson and the Bowling family. They would never change the name of that arena. So this is a sign that Tennessee is kind of stepping on traditions and agreements of the past, Caleb. And they're naming it that, and I'm sure it brings in money to the university, and that's all fantastic. But I'll tell you one thing, if it's ever Thompson Bowling's different. It is a multi-seat venue that hosts concerts and a basketball program that has been above average historically. Not great, above average. If they ever say Neyland Stadium presented by Bojangles, I'm going to vomit. So this to me could be a little bit scary. Could you ever see them adding on something to Neyland Stadium for a little bit of cash? And I want you to tell me on the message board, would that bother you? I'll tell you right now, if that type of deal would directly result in getting a Nico kind of guy because the money in house, sorry, I don't want that deal. I don't want it to be anything other than Neyland Stadium. And Rocky Top Tom says this is one more reason why money doesn't belong within 500,000 miles of college sports. Papa John's Stadium was the first to do that. I thought that one of the first. I thought that was incredibly cheesy at Louisville. No pun intended. If they ever do something,
that was a cheesy pun.
Yeah, I didn't mean to do that. So, but if they ever do that with Neyland Stadium, we're going to do a whole show of how much I hate it. Can you ever imagine that happening? Could Neyland Stadium be Neyland Stadium presented by DirecTV?
Look, I'm going to be honest. I don't like it.
It wouldn't be DirecTV. It'd be Dish Network, I guess.
Dish
That's
Network, yeah. I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of it. I don't like it, but I understand it. Here's the thing. Danny White has that massive fundraising goal, hence the reason he charged for the spring game. In an era of NIL, where you want your boosters to funnel more money to players, you kind of have to seek more corporate sponsorships to make up those losses. Because you still are going to be in the race to have the nicest facilities in all of college football. And you're still going to be in the races to make sure that you're ahead of the curve with all of your venues. I think at that point, to make up for the losses that boosters are going to spend on NIL rather than venues and facilities, you got to get some corporate sponsorships. I don't like it, but here's the thing, guys. This is America. It's capitalism. I mean, if you don't like it, you don't like capitalism. Go be a communist. I mean, it's really that simple. So it's if you don't think this should be a thing, you might be a communist. And I'll just say it like that.
Well, I don't think I'm a communist, but if it's ever Neyland Stadium presented by, or the way they've worded it with Thompson-Boling Arena, I'm going to be absolutely opposed to that. I think, didn't we all laugh when Kentucky's football stadium was named, what is it, Kroger Field or
Kroger Field?
Yeah.
Well, remember this, but remember
what's the next step? What's the next step? Do you take who, for those that don't know, and I know you will, who are Shields and Watkins? And Caleb's Mr. History, he'll definitely know that.
Well, they were the people who provided the funding to build what is now Neyland Stadium. And so It was called Shields Watkins Field until it was renamed Neyland Stadium in the 50s. But Dave, I got to push. Okay, Thompson and Boling, Shields and Watkins, those are no more special than corporations naming the stadium, because those are just people who had a bunch of money and just, like, hey, here's some money. And
no, but there's something more altruistic about that.
No, like there's not.
Well, there's something
Okay,
egotistical.
you
If you and I give money to, and maybe I do, to the College of Communications at the University of Tennessee. If I give money, listen, I've got an ego or I wouldn't be doing this show every day, but I'm not egotistical enough where I want classroom 201 to be the Dave Hooker classroom. Okay. That's just not how I'm wired. But if I want my name on it and I'm giving something back, then yeah, it's a little ego driven, but it's more altruistic than it being a corporate entity.
well, Dave, you watch Painkillers, the Netflix doc. You told me about it last week.
Very good.
Look at what the Sackler family did. How did they they endowed washed their crimes by endowing all these museums and libraries and having their name on it. This is stuff from the Gilded Age. Look at what Andrew Carnegie did. Andrew Carnegie was one of the worst human beings imaginable, but he got Carnegie Hall in New York, Carnegie Theater. I mean, like that's what. So it was altruistic, but a lot of times, I mean, if you go back through American history, the people with that type of flex money, they would endow something to have their namesake to kind of whitewash their crimes or their incompetence. Heck, look at Tennessee right now. You got the Haslam building. That was for the business center. That was Jimmy Haslam. Nothing should be named after him in Knoxville. Okay, he has done nothing but run that university's athletic program into the ground. And Tennessee is more successful now because they kept him away. But he still has the business school named after him.
Well, and
And
Alfred Nobel invented dynamite, and
yes,
it's the Nobel Peace Prize. So yes, that endowment washing, I haven't heard that term, but we can use it. But there are
I
some
made it up.
things yeah, that's very good. There are some things that are sacred. I grew up going to Wallace Memorial Baptist Church there in North Knoxville. I wouldn't want it to be Wallace Memorial Baptist Church presented by Pilate. I mean, at some point there is a line. Yeah, it sounds like you're drawing. It sounds like you're taking the line a little bit further than me, and I respect that. But where is the line? I guess
I
is what
just
I'm
don't.
asking. And to me, it's Neyland Stadium.
I just don't draw the distinction between a corporation and a insanely rich individual. I don't really draw much of a distinction between the two.
I do. I mean, I think that a lot of the giving previous to this was they were guys that wanted to help the student athletes, and yes, they wanted their name on it. And they wanted their friends to know. But for the most part, their motivation was helping student athletes. This 110% by Food City is about a marketing move. You would agree with that, right? This is a marketing
Yes,
move. This
but
is not about helping student athletes.
Dave, come on, don't make me laugh. It wasn't always about helping student athletes either, though. It was about having a certain level of control and power.
Hmm.
I'm just saying. I'm just saying. It was about having a certain level of control and power. And again, you like boosters, for instance, you know this. Yes, maybe the athletic director makes a hiring decision, but you know they got to call the boosters and say, "Hey, you good with this? You all right with this?"
Yeah,
And
I don't
some
know
boosters like to control it completely.
I don't know the boosters top to bottom at every SEC school, but I can tell you this: Tennessee's been very fortunate that I think about 80% of the cash that's given is not about having some sort of control. It's being a part of the university. Now, obviously, there have been boosters that have tried to have a strong influence. Uh, Jim Haslam did not. He ultimately is who you would go to have big decisions made, but I don't think he was on the phone trying to manipulate things. Jimmy Haslam would have been different if it hadn't been for the Cleveland Browns. But yeah, I mean, Neyland Stadium brought to you by Publix would be very disheartening to me. And that's what they just did with Thompson-Boling. And if you don't think it's crossed Danny White's mind, you're crazy. Because what would that be worth? Good gracious. I mean, what? I mean, minimum $25 million a year? I mean, what if you could do Neyland Stadium fielded by Publix, what would that be worth? It's got to be $25 million a year.
I would at a minimum. I'll also say this though, because you brought up Papa John Stadium.
That's almost 20% of their budget, Caleb.
But Dave, I'll bring this up. You brought up Papa John Stadium. I don't know if you remember this, but I know a lot about Louisville because growing up in Memphis, if you remember, Memphis, Louisville, and Cincinnati were kind of peers as college programs in the 90s. They were both, below average football programs that cared about basketball. And they were in a similar conference. Louisville made a forward-thinking decision to care about football. And they did get the naming rights to Papa John Stadium. One of those three programs got into a Power 5 conference before anybody else. And one of those three programs is actually generating enough revenue to where when all the realignment happens, they're going to have a chance to get into one of the two big conferences. And it's Louisville. It's not Cincinnati or Memphis.